Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion, why digital technology is key to great customer experience in a post-pandemic world. I'm Amy Kleppinger from Mobiquity, and we are a digital consultancy with a heavy focus in creating digital products and solutions in the convenience channel. I'll be your host for the technical aspects of today's call. Today, we'll be live broadcasting a pre-recorded discussion led by Michael Kinzly, and featuring Mike Welsh, the Chief Creative Officer at Mobiquity, Nick Patrick, Founder and CEO at Radar, and Dae Kim, the Chief Strategy Officer at P97. We'll also have a special guest appearance from Brian Levine, who is Mobiquity's VP of Strategy Analytics, and he'll be joining us during the Q&A portion of today's call. Today's discussion will focus heavily on the convenience store channel, but we think there are a lot of ideas and principles that are universally applicable, particularly in other retail channels. Our panelists have a depth of knowledge and experience working with leading convenience and retail partners, and I'm sure you'll gain many valuable insights through their discussion. Before we kick off, I have just a few housekeeping topics to cover. First, a recording of today's webinar will be sent out to all attendees after the live session. Also, we'd love to hear your questions. You can type them in the Q&A box, and we'll address as many as we can at the conclusion of the session. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we will be sure to follow up with you through email. And now, without further ado, I'm pleased to get started. Please enjoy.
Thank you for taking the time today out of your busy schedules to join us for this webinar. COVID-19 has certainly had a disruption on the market, with one of the outcomes being the acceleration of digital technology and new services being offered to customers. Whether it be curbside or delivery, it has certainly made a shift in the business and expectations of customers. Radar and Mobiquity completed a study in April to gather some more feedback about consumer behaviors, which we'll review that data in a little bit. But one of the key findings in the data would indicate that convenience stores are behind the curve on creating a rich customer experience relative to the competitor set. We'll dive into details of this in a few minutes. As you're well aware, there's certainly high pressure on the convenience industry and retail in general with COVID. There's specific to convenience, there's pressure on fuel gallons. Obviously, there was a dramatic drop with COVID. The data would indicate, Wall Street Journal had a report that 30% of individuals who continue working from home. There's obviously pressure from electric vehicles and also hybrid vehicles that'll further drive down the number of gallons in the marketplace. You're also experiencing a shift in labor, both higher labor costs and just challenges finding labor, along with potential cost increases with store builds. It's now more important than ever that you make investments in digital technology to further enhance the experience your customers have, and also to retain and grow those customers' market basket to make them more profitable. For C-stores to remain relevant in the future world, these new services and technologies need to be applied to create that customer experience. My name is Michael Kinzly. I have over 30 years of technology experience focused on large programs to help transform businesses, drive efficiencies. For the last 20 years, I worked at Wawa, and of those last 20, the last 6 I was the Senior Director of Digital Technology focused on customer enablement and customer experience technologies. I'm joined today by members of P97 Radar and Mobiquity to have a discussion around digital technology and customer experience. Let's start off by an introduction from P97 and Dae Kim. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about P97 and a little bit about your experience?
Hey, thanks, Michael. My name is Dae Kim. I'm Chief Strategy Officer for P97 Networks. We're based out of Houston, Texas. And what P97 does is we enable mobile commerce for the convenience retail and fuel marketing industry. As of the end of last year, we had 30,000 of the 150,000 sites in the United States on our platform. By no later than Q3 of this year, we expect that 48,000. That number is growing. We're also looking at international markets, of course. So we have a pretty significant presence in APAC, as well as we are making inroads into the industry in Europe and the Middle East as well. So that's a little bit about us. So my background is really, I worked with NACS, the National Association of Convenience Stores, for a number of years. My last role with NACS, I led the team that built the NACS State of the Industry report summit, things like that. So basically my background for almost the last 2 decades has been involved with benchmarking and analyzing data from the convenience retail and fuels marketing vertical. So that's my background. I've been on the board of directors for Connexus as well. And then I've worked with a number, well, pretty much all of the major convenience and fuel operators in the space over the last 2 decades.
So thank you. How about Nick? Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and Radar?
Absolutely. So my name is Nick Patrick. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Radar. Radar is the leading geofencing platform, and we help retail, QSR, and C-store brands improve operations and increase engagement with location, powering everything from arrival detection for curbside pickup to location-based messaging to on-premise app experiences. On a personal level, I've been in the location space for about a decade. Previously at Foursquare, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, is one of the early location-based apps. My dad is actually in the fuel and C-store space, and his company is a P97 customer. So on a personal level, excited to be a part of this, and kind of all coming full circle for me there as well.
Thank you. And Mike from Mobiquity.
Yep. Thanks, Michael. My name is Mike Welsh, and I'm Mobiquity's Chief Creative Officer. I've been with the company since 2013. I took the job sort of on a lark / somebody said I could go and spend time at Red Roof and potentially work with the folks at Wawa. Truth be told, full disclosure, I'm a former Wawa employee. I worked 4 years in high school, 4 years in college at store number 193 and 173. And so I've spent a good part of my career sort of helping companies like Wawa try to figure out ways to make better business decisions. And I'm excited to be here.
Hey, thank you, Mike. So why don't we start with a review of some of the data that was collected during the survey that was conducted by Mobiquity and Radar. Now, the survey represents 1,290 participants, so it's a pretty wide net of people. And the cross-section of people represents sort of the general population, so it's not skewed towards millennials or any specific age group and part of the country. So it's a pretty broad assessment. So one of the questions that was asked is, how frequently do you use restaurant/mobile apps versus convenience store apps, which, as you see in the data represented here, approximately 53 times a year or once a week, the consumers that responded to this survey used an app, a restaurant app, to order food for purchase, which probably is driven a little bit higher by the pandemic. But relative to that same group, if you look at the number for using C-stores mobile experience, only 36 times a year was this group using it. So if you look at, there is a gap between what consumers are using restaurant apps versus C-store apps. So there's an opportunity to do better marketing or better education about the availability of the experience. The other side of the coin was, of those that use the app, what is your frequency of usage? On the positive side is those that are using it, the frequency is about the same. So you got 72 for restaurant mobile apps and 71 convenience store apps. So the gap would look to be around getting more customers to use the app, whether that's through advertising or promotions or some other mechanism to get them to engage with the app. The piece of data that's most interesting is on this slide, and this may be driving some of the data on the prior slide and why we thought this topic was very relevant for discussion. If you look at overall satisfaction, 69% of the individuals were very satisfied with the experience they were seeing with the restaurant apps, If you see the sample size, that was 974 people. Converse side is there's a gap with the convenience side. So there is a gap between what they're seeing from convenience at 53% being satisfied versus the restaurant space. So, and you'll see the sample size being 636 from a convenience store space. So this needs to be a focus area because restaurants and other experiences is now the benchmark that they're using to assess convenience. So why don't we jump to some discussion points, which I will facilitate. The first question is, as noted earlier, digital experience has accelerated due to COVID. What have you seen, and I'll start with P97 and Day, what have you seen, how have you seen retailers or convenience respond to this? I'm assuming you're seeing a growth in usage on your platform, probably more consumers that were on the fence jumping into digital experience. Can you sort of talk a little bit about what you've seen from a P97 perspective?
Pleasure to be with everyone here. Responding to your question though, Michael, I think it's important to rewind the clock 15, 16 months and remember that COVID conditions drove commerce online across pretty much every category.
Every channel.
So whether you were in apparel, fitness, grocery, pets, home goods, right? All those retailers saw a dramatic increase from physical brick and mortar retail to e-commerce transactions, right? The other thing that I think that we have to kind of keep in mind is that before COVID, I'd say you could characterize the convenience and fuel retailing industry with three adjectives, right? And the adjectives I'll use was massive, right? In terms of brick and mortar presence, it's about a third of all retail outlets in the United States. I would say that growth was in the single digit category, right? So whether you're talking about the number of store units being put up, which is flat to slow, or more importantly, the growth of sales. When you look at either fuel and inside categories, I think it's fair to say that growth was relatively slow. And then I think the last condition that I would put is that it had a relatively low penetration in terms of e-commerce. Does that make sense? I mean, it's very much for a century.
Late adopter.
Exactly, right? For a century, it's been a come to me, location-based industry is how I would characterize it. And I think what happened with COVID, fundamentally, it was an inflection point, right? Because the things that we saw in the immediate aftermath of COVID was that fuel volume dropped by 15%. Transactions in line with that, they dropped by 14%. And we saw a shift. In order to survive, we saw retailers shift to inside categories, right? So they began carrying merchandise items that were, maybe before we were characterized as an immediate consumption channel. You saw many retailers add future consumption items, stock up units and things like that. You also saw a shift into categories that the industry had never seen. PPE, cleaners, things like that, right? Bulk toilet paper, bulk paper products, pretty common. And I think the key thing is that in order to survive, and the channel and convenience operators are nothing if not savvy at figuring out how to stay close to the shopper and thrive in times of stress. You saw a massive shift in how they behaved. And so you saw things like order ahead. So it went from brick and mortar, entirely brick and mortar, to a very rapid adaptation of digital marketing. And within digital marketing, you saw a higher level of demand for things like order ahead or click and collect, whatever you call it, BOPUS, buy online, pick up in store, and then delivery, right? And so those were gigantic shifts from a relative standstill from where the country, from where the industry was. And I think it's supported by the fact that according to a McKinsey study that was out recently, I think 75% of consumers tried a new method of a new shopping behavior because of COVID. And what's interesting is the same study says that 73% of shoppers intend to continue. So in terms of what did we see, we saw a massive migration onto our platform because, when I said earlier that P97 powers mobile commerce capabilities, we were, before we were known for, you could pull up to a Shell station as an example, turn on the pump, So you didn't have to dip a credit card. You could just buy fuel. But during COVID, yes, the volume of fuel gallons sold on the P97 platform grew by more than 3x. We saw more than almost 4.5 times the user growth because of COVID. But also more significantly, we went from 95% of the sales on our platform being for fuel and 5% for inside to basically up to about 15-16% of sales on our platform was for inside items. So it was very transformative, to say the least.
That the statistic that you went over from McKinsey, there's actually an article about DoorDash, and they're not seeing the drop off that people were expecting to see with delivery. Is the sort of the country starts opening up, they're seeing sales still growing, which was contradictory to what a lot of people thought. So I would have to agree that most consumers are going to continue to use these new, I'll call them tools, to engage with brands.
That's true.
So, Mike, do you have anything you want to sort of add to that conversation and what you've seen from a Mobiquity point of view?
Yeah, for sure. So, all that's really good information. One of the things that, being the company that tries to pull together experiences and make something meaningful for a consumer, one of the things that we observed over COVID and just prior to COVID, some companies had taken advantage of making a mobile platform as sort of normal seat at the table for the rest of the business, which required an investment, which a lot of CFOs, I would sit in the board meetings or management committees or what have you, and the financial end of the room would say, are we cannibalizing our business? Are we taking money that would already be coming to the stores? Because we build stores. The stores, you could just pump them out. And you knew where they were, how much they produce, at what level they would produce, and all of that was understood. And that's a math problem, which is great. But when COVID happened, if you hadn't been in the market to have mobile commerce, to have payments, to have wallets, to be able to do, loyalty on the fly, to be able to manage curbside, you were caught flat-footed. So as the foot traffic dropped by 40% in these backcourt locations, and the fuel rates dropped at, what they said, 15%, the idea is that you had to figure out a way to capture as much of that units per transaction, average order value as you could. So what you ended up doing was saying, hey, remember that backwater mobile app that we made? Guess what? That's now our only access point to get the consumer to participate. And what they did is they participated. Now, having third-party sort of providers come in, door dashing, that dilutes the brand. It takes away opportunity that you would have as a business. So you sort of see businesses now saying, okay, convenience karma is a thing, and having an any-side engagement strategy is a way for you to take advantage. So folks like Radar and others give opportunities to businesses that hadn't thought that anything beyond the spots in their parking lot was a place that they could play. And now what we're seeing is the folks that took advantage of that opportunity during 2020 were capturing back kind of the McKinsey quote. They're capturing the opportunity, and it's not going away. Everybody feels like regression to the mean is a thing. It isn't. When new habits are formed, inertia is a sort of filing against the new habit being broken. People like the idea of doing it with their phones, so they're going to continue to do that. The one thing that I would say, if you take nothing away from this initial sort of conversation, is that the sort of fragmented attention fatigue that people have, the sort of COVID fatigue that people have, capturing the pent-up demand and taking out the buckets while it's raining as a business is really, really important. And so, sort of lazy IT groups, infrastructure people that are like not focused on the problem, they're the places where you're going to find flat-footed opportunity as a business who's nimble enough to go after those things. So it's going to be the roaring 20s a little bit. And to this, to the victor goes the spoils. Whoever's going to take most advantage will capture sort of that wallet steering that we talk about.
So Nick, do you want to talk a little bit about Radar and what you've seen over the past year? I know you've talked about location services and using it for, I'll call it the click and collect experience. What type of growth have you seen, and how have you seen consumers effectively using your platform?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Obviously in 2020, we spent a lot of time on our phones, and our expectations for digital experiences were heightened. We expected our apps to reflect the reality of the physical world around us. And so despite the fact that Apple and Google have been raising the bar for requesting location permissions, we saw location opt-in rates increase year over year. When we did go out into the physical world, obviously things like speed, convenience, safety were paramount. And so it's one of the reasons why, as Day and Mike had mentioned, we saw a lot of brands roll out, order ahead, curbside pickup, buy online, pickup in store, and similar experiences. And there was a recent Salesforce study that said that 83% of consumers expect those flexible ordering options. So we've seen retailers, QSRs, and C stores use technology, specifically location and geofencing, to bridge the digital and physical, to meet those expectations and to drive business results. And for C stores specifically, oftentimes that's about increasing loyalty usage, getting fuel customers into the C store. And so we generally see three types of use cases with location. One being on-premise app experiences. This is using geofencing to unlock and promote features on-premise, like loyalty or pay at the pump functionality or offers, really giving users a reason to download and use your app on-premise. The second is smarter messaging. So this is using geofencing, in some cases beacons, to trigger or target messaging, maybe push notifications when a customer enters or exits a location, whether that's C store or the parking lot or even a specific parking space. And then finally, arrival detection for curbside. So using geofencing and location to do everything from automatically detecting a customer's arrival to notifying in-store staff on arrival. And so, we're seeing leading retailers and QSRs setting the pace here. Michael, you sort of talked about the delta between the quality of experiences that some consumers perceive in QSR versus convenience. But there's an opportunity to close the gap, and we think that the winners are going to be brands that use location and geofencing to really seamlessly bridge the digital and physical and deliver great customer experiences.
So one question I do want to ask you is, why not use just native services, right, that are available from Android or Apple? Why partner with, a Radar as an example? What is your advantage in the marketplace?
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously location is powerful, but it's challenging to build with, right? Yeah. And that encompasses everything from accuracy. GPS can bounce off of buildings. Maybe you don't have great connectivity, to privacy, right? Location data is sensitive. And so you want to be thoughtful about the data you're collecting, how long you're persisting it. And then also, connectedness, being able to join location data with other customer data, whether that's past order history or CRM data about a consumer. So that's a sort of set of challenges that we think a lot about at Radar. And our goal is to abstract away all those challenges and cross-platform differences and make it really easy to build with location, and also not reinvent the wheel with location, and focus on the unique aspects of your app, your physical store footprint, your brand, as opposed to building location from scratch.
Thank you. Speaking of challenges, one of the biggest items that I think all convenience, or probably most retailers, have to deal with is they have a huge footprint of stores, as you noted, a huge footprint already invested in technology, very store centric. And a lot of times there's challenges with sort of connecting the store experience with the digital experience. And I don't want to, POS is an example, which is your primary transaction system, really was not architected and engineered to the large universe. It was really architected to, really transact in the store. So Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about, from a P97, how you've helped retailers through these challenges and sort of what you're seeing in the marketplace?
Sure. So I think you bring up a really interesting point, Michael. And I think if you look up the definition of tech debt, I think you're going to see a point of sale, right? Because like it or not, the reality of it is when you were looking at an older industry paradigm, right, where we were again location based and it was commodity centric, I think the point of sale being the center of how you plugged in or how you transacted made sense, right? The challenge though is as you shift to these processes that we just talked about, right? Mm-hmm. As demand goes up for location services, as demand goes up for order ahead, buy online, pick up in store delivery, as demand for any number of these innovations that we've seen as part of the pandemic kind of pick up, the systems, in order to get that to work, the systems have to go above site, right? And so the ability to compete now, I mean, with my phone, I mean, I have near perfect price discovery for anything that I want to buy right that make sense? I can get it delivered. I can pick the mode of delivery. So order fulfillment is pretty straightforward as well. And so I think that's really, from what we try to do at P97, it's really to kind of give retailers control over how do you present that consumer experience, right? So yeah, we want to eliminate consumer friction, of course, and that's where the value of the technology comes in. But at the end of the day, we don't feel that in order to be able to be flexible and adapt business models going forward in the future, the technology base itself has got to be flexible, right? And it's got to be helps to be standards based too, right? That's another piece here. Yep. It doesn't help if you're tied to a legacy system that's monolithic or you can only tap one way. That again goes back to tech debt, right? And so that's really what we do is, we like to think that one of the things that we do very well is take a lot of the complexity out of just e-commerce, right? And so that's why we started in payments, right? Payments is unnecessarily complicated for many operators to penetrate. And whether you're talking about, think about the layers that a transaction has today in a modern convenience and fuel retailing setting. There's a loyalty program. You want to deliver good value. You want to customize that offer for something like a food service or even coffee, right? So when you think about all those different levels of complexity that are on there, I think solving for each of those is really what we're trying to do. And I think that's the goal for, and I see Radar, Mobiquity, all of us here, what we're trying to do is eliminate consumer friction in that transaction.
Yeah, Mike, you've worked with several convenience retailers. What's your perspective on this?
Yeah, so doing this for consumers, one of the things that and just like on this call, the consumer isn't here, but sort of they are. The idea is that the consumer is generally always last to know because they'll get surprised in the app, right? Like if you change the auth screen because you went from Ping to somebody else, everybody's going to get a surprise and they're all going to be unhappy for a minute. But if you tie that in with an offer and say, hey, relog in, free coffee, or whatever it is, you can offset choices and decisions that consumers have to be making constantly. The other piece of it is that companies place bets. And one of the things that if you think in bets, you get the maximum opportunity for any experiment that you might do. Say it's Radar, and I'm going to include dwell time. And the fact that I have dwell time as a piece of data and a weather event and a high margin product that's sitting on the shelf, I could put those things in and train a model. And I can make a decision that a consumer or a group of consumers, audience of one, I could steer one more incremental wallet purchase. Altria comes along, has this great offer. I can include like a Jumia or something like that from an age-restricted product perspective, so I can immediately capitalize on an opportunity. And it's contactless. You show me your license, you get the product. There's a lot of things out there that are available to companies, and most of the time there's this fast follow thing. I don't want to take the risk that Starbucks took. I want to follow behind them. The issue is that now everybody's sort of starting at go. Everybody has a P97 in their pocket. Everybody has a Radar opportunity. Everybody has. Now it's a matter of how do you audience manage? How do we're attention merchants. How do you sort of merchandise that attention in the most efficient way possible for the business and at the same time delivering on the promise, right? Convenience is not a choice, and it always beats loyalty. Always. Convenience will always beat loyalty because all those corners where those C-stores are either on one side of the highway or the other. And so the idea is that you can maximize your opportunity to steer wallet if you just take advantage of some of these baseline technologies that sort of COVID forcing functioned on everybody.
It's interesting. I anecdotally, I was at another convenience store and fueled up there, and they had the pamphlets for the rewards program, right? So I pulled one of them, said, I'll sign up. And the first thing, I get home, I log in or try to create an account. The first thing they said was, go in the store and pick up a rewards card.
Oh my God. Well, you had me at pamphlet. As soon as you said pamphlet, I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened? Did somebody just say pamphlet? So that is an indicator. If you just took a snapshot, that's it.
Yeah. So Nick, what are your thoughts on, customer experience? What have you seen helping companies work through some of the technical debt, to coin what the word that they used, to help create great experiences?
Yeah, I think we've seen two main pain points. The first is just the friction that arises when you try to do things kind of not technology enabled, or we think about the location aspect, so not location enabled. And we saw a lot of brands roll out quick and dirty V1s of curbside or BOPIS experiences that had a lot of friction, right? The customer might place an order, arrive at the store, not know where to go. Do I park in this space? Do I go in the store? Am I supposed to wait here? Am I supposed to call a phone number? They might miss physical signage. And on the flip side, the staff, might not know when a customer arrives. So the customer might have to wait for 10 minutes. Their food might get cold, whatever. And so now we're seeing more and more brands invest in a curbside 2.0 or a BOPIS 2.0 experience, where they're using technology, they're using location to make those experiences as seamless as possible. On more of the tech debt side, we talked about this a bit already, but location is hard, right? Doing this with a high level of accuracy, doing it in a privacy first way. We talk about kind of connectedness and other great tools, right? How do you send your location data to your CRM system or your CDP or your marketing automation platform or your analytics platform? So doing this in a way that all of these systems can talk well to each other, thinking about operational debt and also tech debt, but also thinking about what's the impact and how do I measure this and how do I establish a baseline, right? If I'm investing in location, how is that moving the needle for me in terms of digital revenue or engagement? What is my baseline for wait time for my curbside pickup experience, and how do I measure that and drive it down? So we think a lot about the analytics side of these things as well, and how we can help our customers measure these things, establish a baseline, and also measure the ROI of these investments.
So, I started off with some of the headwinds that convenience retailers are facing, and most retailers are facing. I'm sure there's a lot more scrutiny going on about what investments over the next several years. Why invest in digital now? I mean, a lot of, convenience has been a late adopter for the most part. Why not kick the can for another year or two, till whatever the new norm, whenever the new norm is. Why invest now? Nick, do you want to sort of, since I've picked on everybody else for the first part of all the other questions, why don't you kick off that sort of conversation? Why invest today? Why not wait?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of paradoxical, right? Everybody's about to start moving around the physical world again. Are things going to go back to normal? Maybe I should just, kind of take a pause on this. But obviously, everything went digital first last year. Our expectations for digital experiences were heightened. People are going to start moving around the physical world again, but they're going to look for digital experiences that seamlessly bridge the digital and physical, and they're going to have a lot of choices, right? Are they going to order something to eat from a QSR app or from a C-store app? And so we're seeing that QSR and retail are really setting the pace, maybe with C-stores having a little bit of an opportunity for catch up. So I think prioritizing digital, investing in technology and innovation now to keep pace is really critical. Again, what I would say is, the good news is that there are, more great SaaS vendors and agency partners out there to work with than ever that, aren't just platforms, technology platforms, but, trusted partners when it comes to things like best practices and data and privacy. And we aim to be not just a, technology platform at Radar, but also, trusted partners for navigating this complex landscape. And really just letting you kind of avoid reinventing the wheel and focusing on the surrounding experiences that make your brand or your app or your physical experiences unique.
So, Mike, what are your thoughts and what you're seeing? Why invest?
Yeah, and why now, right? So the question is sort of like, I'll use one of Amazon's favorite, sort of principles of you make choices based on a one-way door or two-way door. So when you're a business who might be watching this webinar at some point in time, one of the things that you have to consider is, am I making an investment that is a one-way door? Meaning I'm going to acquire another company. That's generally going to be a one-way door. So you can make a lot of money and do a lot of acquisitions and get somewhere towards that number. But you'll have forgotten about all the loyalty, all the customer databases you'll migrate, all the P97 implementations you'll have to struggle through. The reality is that if you think about the two-way doors, like, hey, we just had a global pandemic and everybody is shopping and behaving differently. And our clients have asked us in many cases to activate the pump as fast as you can so that no one has to touch anything. And somebody like P97 steps in and says, yep, we'll make that pump activate. We'll do the round trip. We'll give a loyalty bump for it. And so clients that can do that, they can say, well, afterwards we can shut that down. We can have people go, it's New Jersey. You have to have somebody serve the gas for you. So when we start to talk about investments and why not and why now, we oftentimes will tell clients it doesn't have to be a mutually exclusive decision. You can start to make choices that are two-way doors. Try it out, figure it out, test and learn, have a pulse failure muscle that you work out well. That can position you for whatever is coming in the next couple of years. It's going to take till 2025-ish before all this stuff sort of evens itself out. But the next normal is what you're trying to plan for. So you make your investments accordingly. And if you do it, one of the last stat that I'll give you is for a 10-year period, all design-led companies outperform the S&P 500 by over 210%. Now, those are companies that you've all heard of: Starbucks, Apple, Herman Miller. The choices they make, that they put the experience at the absolute peak of what they care about, and then everything else is in service of that. That can make those investment decisions about why now, why not, a lot easier.
Thank you, Mike. Dave, what are your thoughts?
I think Nick and Michael just made some fantastic points. Certainly, definitely has got my wheels churning here. The only thing that I'll add is I think really retailers have to think about, so what are the alternatives, right? So the reality of it is, I think investing in digital at this point is table stakes, right? For all the reasons that we just talked about. But if you think, but let's consider the alternatives, right? So what else are you going to do to grow? Well, cost of growth is high right now. If you're looking to buy, acquisition multiples right now are 9 to 10x EBITDA, right? So that's pretty significant. It's probably the highest multiples that we're seeing in the history of the industry, right now, right? Not last 5 years, right? This is over a long time. The other piece is typically, if you're not buying your way to growth, you can build your way to growth, right? So, well, that's a challenge, because I think one of the things that COVID did was it drove the cost of building supplies higher. It's hard to find the materials. It's hard to find the labor. But let's be real. So realistically, according to NACS, I think the cost to build a new store today, with all the food service and the pumps and all that stuff in there, it's anywhere from $6 to $8 million per site. Now, that's just the dollars. We also know, and Michael, you know this from your time in the industry, it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years to pull the zoning permits, meet the regs. Yeah. Exactly, all the inspection. So on top of the 6 to 8 million per store, it's 2 to 3 years before you can get a unit up and online, right? So compared to those, so when you look at the buy multiples versus the headwinds that face retail operators compared to build, I would say that investing in digital is probably one of the smartest and best returns on investment you can think of right now. The other thing you've got to really keep in mind is if that wasn't compelling enough, pretty much every vertical right now, every other channel is coming into the traditional convenience space, right? Yes. So, dollar stores now, yeah, it's the same inside shoppers, convenience stores, right? They're now selling categories that they didn't 5 years ago: tobacco and alcohol. You can buy, candy at Home Depot and Best Buy, right, as you're checking out. And then last, you've got the disruptors like Amazon and GoPuff, right? So I guess when you look at the landscape, you go, if I'm a brick and mortar retail, I need to invest, and I'm going to get pretty great ROI, because looking at the alternatives, really, how do you weigh those alternatives? Does that make sense? Yeah. And so that's really the point that I would throw. But I think Nick and Michael hit the nail on the head with both of their statements as well.
Yeah, I would say the one benefit that exists today that probably did not exist maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago is the number of, I'll call it SaaS products that are out there to help accelerate all this. You have Radar. I know at one point we built a lot of location services. That's available now, so you don't have to make those investments. The integration to the legacy POS platforms, P97 helps solve that problem. So the ability to come to market quicker, I guess, is the best way to say it. There's plenty of tools out there that really can help you get to market quicker and then innovate on that versus building it all from scratch, which probably 5, 8 years ago was the only decision you had.
Right. I mean, the competitive advantage back then, a decade ago, was by building something that no one else had. But to your point, everything's off the shelf now, right?
Yeah.
So the competitive advantage is speed.
Yeah, and the experiences are all the same, not for anything, but if you're innovating on, curbside pickup, that's probably, consumers have a pattern that they're used to, and that's, to go against that can create some friction for the consumer.
That's right. That's right.
Well, we did just have one thing that changed everybody's expectations around friction, right? So when you as a company and a board look back and go, okay, what was the trigger event? A global pandemic that shut the entire planet down for a while is a pretty solid reboot. Like, that's the blue screen of death for businesses. And when you as a business think about making investment strategies, all of your algorithms are broken. All of your dashboards are meaningless. All of the things that you rely on, flash reporting and all the stuff, how many of this are we selling this week? All that stuff out the window. What's coming back in, though, is new expectations. And those new expectations require that you go out and talk to users, talk to the consumer, walk up to them at the forecourt. Maybe you might still have to wear a mask, but walk up to them and ask them, because survey research is only good for so much. You really have to get into the head of the consumer. And I think that's where you'll find a lot of these why now, why not kind of forcing functions for investment.
Thank you, Mike, Day, and Nick, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to participate in this webinar and share your perspectives on the importance of customer experience in the post-COVID-19 world. It was a great discussion, and we'll pause now and respond to some of the questions that were provided during our discussion.
Great live discussion. So I think now we will ask our panelists to turn on their videos and unmute, and we will cover some of the questions that have come in during our session. I will try to rotate the questions across our panelists, but definitely, guys, feel free to jump in if I kind of assign a question to the wrong person and you have something that you want to add. So let's see, we will start with a question that I will give today. So you mentioned a lot of problems that are facing the convenience vertical. What's the most significant in your opinion? And I will add to that, and how could digital technology help?
So, hi, Amy. First off, thanks to you and Mobiquity for hosting this. I've really enjoyed being on this panel and hearing the perspectives from both Mikes and Nick here. So thanks again for letting us be part of this thing. I think in answer to your question, the biggest, I think, existential threat to convenience and fuel retailers is really letting others get in between them, us, and the consumer, the shopper that we serve. So this whole notion of disintermediation, right? Where if you think about it from a supply chain standpoint, between the supplier and the buyer of a good, you have multiple layers, right? Manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, right? So this whole notion that as we look at e-commerce, which is becoming mobile commerce effectively, by the way, as we as a channel, I think the biggest threat to convenience and fuel retailers is really just letting others get in the way to pick off the consumers that we have grown to serve, right? And so I think from the fuel context, you see that, right? So from fuel, as long as it's liquid fuel, sure, consumers have to come to the 150,000 gas station convenience stores in the United States to buy liquid fuel. But as you see, you're already seeing signs with EVs and other fuel technologies coming online that there could be somebody else that gets between us and the consumer. Inside the store, I think you're seeing this already, right? Where you're seeing other players, some of which were mentioned on the video before, kind of coming in, and they're steering consumers away from the retail locations that we have. So how does digital help? Well, frankly, I think mobile commerce, the things that Mobiquity, Radar, P97, and others, the things that we focus on, it enables retailers to make that what it is. It's an and solution, right? So they have brick and mortar right now, and they need to have mobile, right? And so it allows them to keep that transaction and that relationship with consumers from happening. It enables them to keep it on their terms, in their environment, in their ecosystem. And I think that's really critical.
Great answer. Thank you. I'm going to kick this next one over to Michael Kinzly because I think it's kind of another broad summary question. And it is, what do you feel like is the biggest hurdle for C-stores in adopting digital technology?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on this in the video as noted. The technical challenges are certainly there, though what the partners on this call have helped alleviate a lot of those challenges. I do think that there's some belief that there's some silver bullet out there that, if we do this, this will, solve sort of the create this great experience, but it's really a set of investments that need to happen that create the end-to-end experience. So looking for, if we make this investment, this will solve our problems or create a great digital experience. It's really a series of investments and looking, for that one investment to really drive great customer engagement. There isn't really a true silver bullet. It's a series of investments. I would also say it's critical that as you look at these investments, that it's aligned to the business strategy. So if your business strategy is to grow food service, well, focus your investments on that area. If it's to grow fuel, focus your investments in that area. You don't want to sort of become the lowest common denominator across all the touch points of the customer. You really want to make sure it's aligned to your business strategy. So the results you're driving are driving the outcome that, the executives are looking to drive for the overall company.
Yeah, that's a great point. Good to remember. This one I'm going to send over to our special guest, Brian. So thank you, Brian, for joining us. Just to remind everyone on the call, Brian's kind of stepping in for Mike, who was pulled away today. But Brian has a tremendous amount of experience in C-store. So thanks so much for jumping in. The question for you is, if you had one piece of advice for a C-store starting your digital journey, what would that piece of advice be?
Yeah, so sorry I'm not Mike, but there's a conversation that Mike and I have had on many projects that we agree on, and so I'll try and do my best to channel him here as well. That when you're starting a digital program, you're being very thoughtful about creating a fair exchange of value with your customers. So you can't just think of, what is your business opportunity and what could make you money. Instead, if you're going to make something off of this for your company out of, doing something with a customer, what are you giving them? And we have to think about it in terms of not just at the abstract, but at really key physical moments during the journey. For instance, let's say it's an app to do some of these things that we've talked about that folks are doing now, especially during COVID. So typically a lot of things that you might want to use an app for at a C-store are going to be local and on premise. So you're not really going to think about downloading this thing and taking advantage of it until you're there. So once you're there, you're busy. And now what you're going to do is you're somehow communicated that this thing's going to help you and give you some benefit. You have to find it, you have to download it, you have to see where it is on your phone, open it, you have to go through the onboarding, you have to create an account, and then you can take a benefit of it because you're not going to go through all these steps at home. So what is this person going to get out of that exchange at that moment? If you're not giving them enough value to make up for that time and effort, they're going to say, yeah, this has a benefit, but I'm going to do it later. And then later is going to become later and later and later. So, either you have to figure out something strong to give them as that first benefit to set them on a course of being a long-term user, or you've got to take out a lot of that friction. How can we make it incredibly easy to just get started? And this becomes, this is less acute for some of the services that we're talking about now, pick up an order when you arrive or some loyalty programs. But look, a lot of the companies that we're talking to are really interested in doing, let's say it's scan and go or a voice assistant to do something and things that people are unfamiliar with. You're increasing the burden on them and they don't know what the benefit is. So in these cases, you want to establish those benefits on those things they understand first. Grow that value before you introduce these, but really just to think about what's your customer realizing they're giving you, and you have to make up for everything they're giving you.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think Mike would be really excited by the answer because I know that he is definitely a big proponent of making sure that there's always a fair exchange of value. And I think the good news is that convenience store retailers have a lot that they can offer up it's just really making sure that it's, like you said, taking the friction out and communicating what that value is. I love it. So on this theme of advice for people, I think this one is really specifically for Nick. What's the first step you would take in engaging with a new customer to determine when and how geofencing can add the most value to their business?
Thanks, Amy. Great question. I think the first question that we always ask is, what are your most important business priorities right now? And I think chances are for anything related to digital engagement or digital revenue or digital app experiences, geofencing is something that can help move the needle there. And, we've done a bunch of work with folks in the fuel space, the C-store space. They've come to us and said things like, we want to really drive adoption of our, pay at the pump functionality. Or we're experiencing issues where folks will try to unlock the pay at the pump functionality when they're not on-prem. We've had folks come to us and say, we want to drive on-premise app downloads or on-premise loyalty usage. I was sort of laughing, rewatching the exchange between Michael and Mike about, did somebody say pamphlet? And just kind of the friction of getting a pamphlet, going home, forgot to get something in the, in the store. So geofencing can be a powerful tool to unlock app features, to drive behaviors. I really liked what Brian said, about the friction involved in downloading an app on-prem and signing up and hunting for the right features. If your app experience is the same, on-prem versus when somebody's sitting at home at their couch, on the couch, what's in it for them, right? So, starting with, what are your most important business objectives? Digital revenue, digital engagement, or digital customer experience. Everything starts there, from the first conversation all the way through the implementation to our customer success team. And, we think of ourselves as a SaaS company, a SaaS vendor, but also really a partner long-term for helping you achieve your business objectives and delivering great digital product experiences.
Awesome. Thanks. We have one last question, and this one I'll just open up to everyone. I know that Mike would have a perspective on this one, so if no one has strong feelings about it, we will definitely publish the answer to this in our email follow-up. But I'll throw it out to all of you guys. The question is, what capabilities should we be considering when thinking about adding age-restricted products on our mobile commerce platforms?
It's a very specific question.
Yeah.
I
It looks like Brian might have some things.
Yeah, I have something, and just because I've been looking at this right now with one of my clients, and there's the things that we can think about validation of age and stuff like that. But a lot of convenience locations, age-restricted products could be a huge driver after, say, fuel, of getting people into the store. So if you want to get, if you're a supplier of age-restricted products, is there a way that what you're developing can help the convenience store also convert an age-restricted product buyer into a buyer of something else on the site? So can you be thinking about capabilities that can help the brand that you're working with? And that's one of the things that comes to mind because I'm actually working on something like that right now. So yeah, it's not a specific capability, but it's just something to keep in mind.
So, I would say it's a very good question because, we talked about in the recording about how there's all this pressure from other areas hitting C-stores. Well, where else can you go to get a sandwich, a pack of cigarettes, and a 6-pack of beer potentially delivered, right? And I think it's a problem that, if you look at differentiators that C-stores have, that is clearly an area that needs to be thought about because your dollar stores, your CVS's, pick whoever, can't do that. So I do think it's a problem that we need to solve collectively as an industry on how we solve age restriction. But, obviously the age verification and making sure you're getting it to the customer who ordered it is key. And obviously it's a very delicate thing, with WeCard and all the other things that exist already in the industry. You have to take the necessary precautions to make sure the person who's ordering it, paying for it, and receiving it is the same customer. So, that may even be, validating the ID at the time of delivery to make sure everything matches up, which is probably, if you stick to the WeCard example, probably the right standard to be thinking about is a retailer, unless, until the industry comes up with other ways to do that validation. But I do think it's a problem that needs to be thought about very carefully because of the sensitive nature of it. But it's also our differentiator as an industry and how we differentiate ourselves from all the other competitors in the market.
I will jump in and add to Michael's point as well as Brian's point. I think one area here, I think, Michael, you referenced WeCard. I think NACS and Connexus are working on an initiative called twoway. It's something that P97 is supporting, and it's a standards-based solution to address the problem that Mike just laid out, right? Because I think there's, if you think about this, there's a lot of different nodes, and there's a lot of different questions here. So beginning with, who views the offer, right? Who is actually placing the order, to how is the order being fulfilled? And right now, the landscape right now is a lot of different retailers are pursuing this in a lot of different ways. And certainly from our standpoint, we're probably working with 3 or 4 different solution providers. So we are very interested in supporting or seeing the industry kind of come to a standards-based approach to this. So I know that if you go over to convenience.org, it's probably something that NACS is trying to coordinate and working on. And so you can get more information about this initiative there.
I don't have a ton to add. Radar doesn't have any, age restriction functionality, but I do think it points to a broader conversation and a set of pain points around compliance and restricting functionality in general. So I'll just add that, we think a lot about location verification and location restriction. I mentioned earlier, you don't want somebody to unlock, pay at pump number 3 sitting at home on their couch, right? Maybe for privacy reasons, you want to make sure that you're not collecting location data outside of the United States, or you're only retaining it for X days. So I think it's a really interesting kind of connected space of problems. And we think about location restriction and location verification sort of as the flip side of removing friction, as Brian mentioned, for unlocking functionality as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll just add that it was asked by an anonymous person, but I know that there is a lot in the technology space that all of the folks on this call are exploring with facial recognition and True ID and all of those great things. So feel free to reach out. We will send contact information to everyone who registered. Feel free to reach out, and I'm sure that everyone on this call would be happy to talk through the specifics of your question. And that was actually the last question, which is great timing because we're just about out of time. So let me thank all of our panelists again. This was such a great discussion. And if anyone on the call has any follow-up questions that you think about after the fact, we will, as I mentioned, be sending a follow-up email with this recording in it and information to contact us with further questions. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks to our panelists, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.